Hello, I'm Stuart Bowes, and you're watching or listening to the Net Hero podcast. This is a podcast for you if you care about what we're doing to the planet. You don't have to be an eco-warrior. We believe business is the solution to making things better. But we're for people who want to make that difference by either cutting their emissions or coming up with ideas that can help us do things a bit better. We've featured politicians, academics, lots and lots of business people, entrepreneurs, inventors, and of course people who are just interested in doing the right thing. So sit back, listen and enjoy, and make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Please share it with your friends and colleagues, and you can always check out our two websites that cover all of this, Energy Live News and futurenetzero.com. This podcast is purely editorial, so sit back and enjoy this week's episode. The problem for most of us is that if we look at trying to make things better, everything around net zero seems to be, let's generate cleaner power. But should we be looking at where we live and actually reducing our energy needs, making things more efficient, and in particular, making our housing stock more efficient? Well, that's the topic that I'm going to discuss today. But I'd call him an old friend of the podcast now, Stu Horne, who has been here on different guises. But this time, Stu, you're here as the chair of the Heat and Buidlings Council, rather than your other advocacy work, isn't it?
That's right. And so the Heat and Buidlings Business Council, we're a group of businesses. There's only 9 of us. We are a small and perfectly formed sort of advocacy vehicle. And what we do is that we have really good conversations with decision makers about the policies that will drive the net zero transition forward. So we're all about the engagement. We're not a trade body. We're all about the engagements of getting a bunch of what we call investment grade policies, so investment grade solutions in front of people. So very practical, pragmatic things that will help to drive the transition forward.
Your mix of you've got an energy company involved, you've got sort of finance groups, you've got sort of pressure groups and charities as well. Who are you trying to talk to? Because I think people may not have heard it, and I certainly didn't know that much about the council. It's only been in existence, I think you said just before we recorded, 2 years. So is your aim to get bigger? You said you're small and perfectly formed, or is it to be kind of the size you are, or maybe get some more different voices from across sort of the buildings world?
Well, our aim is about impact. So what we want to be able to do is to put the right arguments and evidence across that helps convince people to take action in the right areas. And we can come back to the cost of low carbon technologies. Yeah. But that's a really, really key one where we'd like to see the right policies put in place to tackle upfront costs, so that these technologies become more affordable and we can get them into more people's homes. And that has an impact on carbon, and will have an impact on people's energy bills as well. So there's actually we're not looking to grow really big, but what we are looking to do is to have really impactful conversations with decision makers. A lot of that's not upfront, in the media. It's behind the scenes. It's face to face, but it's really effective. And I think that's the key thing. All of us who are members of the council, that's what we really value. And the sort of people we're talking to, it's everybody from ministers to civil servants to think tanks, all the people who are around in that policy area who are thinking about the challenges of the heat transition, and sort of trying to work out ways through the different problems that we're facing.
Over the couple of years we've done, well, it's more than that now, actually probably nearly 3.5 years we've been doing the podcast. Heat has been one of those tricky ones, right? And I've done podcasts on it. And if you look at it and the score from your other hats that you wear, we've done a really good job of decarbonising power, right? We've been doing, let's get our electricity generation cleaner, let's go to renewables, let's build nuclear, we're doing all of that. Heat has been secondary, I think, if not tertiary, in politicians' minds for more than, so as long as we've been running Energy Live News, which is the last 15 years. And I think the reasons I've had over the conversations I have with people are pretty much always the same. It's very individual, right? So everyone, got it in my own house. Or my wife wants it hotter, I want it colder, all of that. The stock is so unusual. We're not a country where we're all kind of living in similar kinds of houses. It's such a variety of housing stock. It's a very old housing stock in general. And then obviously we've just got issues of access as well. Some people have oil fired heaters. Most of us have gas boilers. Some can have, ground source, air source heat pumps. So looking at all of this, is it fair to say that heat has been a headache for politicians and the sector as well to get hold of? And that's why perhaps they've gone after the, not easier, but the more direct route of trying to decarbonise electricity?
I mean, it's difficult to decarbonise electricity, and we've made real progress, but it's easier than decarbonising heat, because whereas you had tens of power stations or a couple of hundred power stations across the country, which are thermal generators, and we're moving to a more distributed model, but we're still talking about hundreds of wind farms and solar generation generators and nuclear power stations, etc. That's very different to 26 million homes, which is what you're talking about in decarbonising heat. So you've got a massively more distributed issue. Our homes are vastly different inside and out. There's lots of different challenges with fabric. We have some of the poorest housing stock in Europe in terms of its age and quality of building. And every home's challenges are slightly different. I've gone through this journey personally. I live in a home that's 109 years old. It's also very leaky. Working out what to do with it, what's going to be effective, and how much I do before I actually, I'm in the process of getting a heat pump installed. So, I've kind of made my decision about where I draw the line. But that's going to be different for everybody. It's a difficult and confusing process. So, as a council, we represent a group of organisations that have lots of different solutions to lots of those challenges. So it's not one technology; it's lots of different technologies, from heat pumps of ground source, air source, to district heating networks, to zero emission boilers, to flexible solutions. So actually, there's lots of different technologies out there that can help decarbonise homes. And actually, we've got a lot of the tools that we need, but it's about making sure the right facilitating policies are in place to make sure people are aware and know what's right for them, that they're able to afford the upfront costs, and also that the right facilitating policies are in place to make sure those are affordable and attractive on an ongoing basis.
I mean, I suppose the thing is, if you do a comparison with transport, right? So it's quite a simple kind of analogy, I suppose. We want to shift people from burning fossil fuels in cars to going to electric cars, right? And most people go, that's the right way to do it. And we see the problems we've had, right? Which is the cost and all of that. With heat, you've just outlined it. It's not like shift from one to another. You're right. I could go for solar panels and solar thermal. I could go for heat pump. I could go for this zero emission boiler. There are hybrid heat pump boilers. There's so many technologies. Hydrogen boilers could become a huge. This is where I think it's very hard, A, for the consumer, and B, for the politicians, because it's not like they say, it's like put your seatbelt on, right? It's a very simple message. Put it on. That's it. Decarbonising heat seems very, very complicated because of all the things you've just said about there's such a variety of the fabric of the homes we live in and what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. Just in terms of how that fits in with what our mission is as a council, we want to make that kind of decision process easier for people. So we want to make heat possible, decarbonising heat possible and attractive. So you can be really reductionist about this, which is that actually what we're doing is we're changing the source of heating in your home. So actually we're still heating your home, we're just using a different type of source for it. That might be more complicated in terms of transition for some types of heating than for others. But if we take the zero emission boiler, for example, that's more of a hot swap solution than, say, for example, a ground source heat pump, where you've got to find space for the ground source network if you're installing it, or all the sort of permutations around a district heating network and how that might be deployed into a district. So there are pros and cons of all of those solutions, but actually it's sort of, there's an awareness that the public needs to have of this transition is coming, which is really important. There's putting the right policies in place so that this is an affordable transition, it's a just transition, so that we're helping people from all economic backgrounds to be able to access. So ultimately, what we're talking about with electrification is being able to tap into the low cost of renewables coming through the electricity market, and then feed that into your heating system. So there's kind of a vision of what this looks like in the 2030s, which should be really attractive. But of course, you need those electric heating systems, because we're largely talking about electric solutions here, to be in place before we can get there. And I suppose there's an analogy there with the electric vehicle. I'm also an electric vehicle driver, so I'm trying to walk the walk, you can see, on things.
On all fronts,
I have what I'm going to describe as an extremely affordable electric vehicle, because it costs pretty much the same. Well, mine costs pretty much the same as a petrol equivalent, which surprised me when I was looking into it. There are, most of the time, it's just a really easy car to drive. There are occasional challenges with charging, but like few and far between. So actually, do you know what? In terms of what does it feel like in terms of driving a vehicle, mostly it's pretty much the same. And ideally, that's where you want to be in terms of what does it feel like when people have transitioned to low carbon heating. Actually, we don't probably, on the long term, don't want people to be thinking about it day to day.
Yeah, I get it.
Low carbon heating system. I've just got a heating system that works and is affordable, is, you know, kind of where it needs to be at.
But it's funny, you know, sorry to interrupt you, but the heating thing is very, very interesting, because, like, you know, my mother, she's got a electric heating system, but it's all set, right? And there's no kind of thermometers it's complicated, right? She's in her 80s, whatever. So the old days, she loved the little thermostat dial on the wall, you know, in our house when I was growing up, and it was on, off, you know, 20 degrees, whatever you want to do. This is the sort of thing, the same as with cars, going back to that analogy, we change our behavior. You go somewhere, then you have to stop to charge, but hang on, make it part of your journey. With heat, if you take, so many of us are so different, but if you look at the general heating being a central heating system run by gas, you set it, you turn it on, turn it off, whatever. Electric heating systems work differently. There's inertia, there's all of these things. Do you think there'll be behavioral changes that need to come as well to adapt to the way we are? And that is, again, maybe a barrier to why this is taking longer.
Well, it very much depends on what system you install. So maybe if we wind back a bit and go, I think it's important to think about, in the situation you just described, I think also, I've lived in a lot of different homes, I've rented lots of different homes.
Yeah, same here.
and so I've also inherited lots of different heating systems that worked in one different way or another. And there's very I've found there's very little consistency. And, you know, that's borne out in our advice services. Our advisors, if you're talking to a phone advisor, they'll have a folder full of PDF documents, each of which have their instructions for different types of gas boilers. So if we're trying to help somebody to work out what the controls are and how they work with their gas boiler, which is still really important, millions of gas boilers still installed and will be for years, they need to be able to, you know exactly how to help that person with that particular model. So that's really, really complex. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that. Actually, already we live in an ecosystem where there's lots of divergence and complexity. There's an opportunity where we're moving to low carbon heat, where we can have, as we're installing the heating systems, that people, if we get the transition into a good place, that people are getting the advice that they need about what's right for them, and then also that they can use those systems to the best of their advantage afterwards. But people will need some support. My director of operations in Scotland calls this the "how do I dry my socks" question, because we do a lot of work with social housing.
On my radiator.
Well, if you used to dry your socks on a radiator and open a window to get the moisture out, actually that's no longer going to work so well with a low temperature radiator. And also we don't need to open a window in the same way to let the heat out. So actually these really practical questions are really important. So from our...
do you know what? It's a brilliant line. That's so true. That is so true. Because if you have underfloor heating, where you can stick your socks and dry them.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, and there'll be some people who have underfloor heating installed. There'll be some people who have the same radiator, it just is at a lower temperature. And this will be different depending on what's right for your home. And I suppose from our point of view, from the council, but also from Energy Saving Trust, it's really important that people have that advice and support that helps them to be satisfied with the new system they've got, and supported. And one of the things we advocate for is for a national advice service for England. So there is a national advice service in Scotland. There's a national energy advice service in Wales. There isn't one in England. And that's the sort of thing that would be really vital for helping people to continue on that journey and like work out, actually, okay, I can, I know how to work this. I know how I'm going to get the best out of it. And I think that's really important for satisfaction. It's also really important for achieving the cost savings that people will think they're going to be getting, but will need some help to actually, in some cases, to actually get those over the line. So things like, for example, being able to choose the right tariff that's right for them for a flexible heating system.
I want to explore a couple of areas. Let's start with housing itself, right? And we've done the story of where we are. This is very crude, but let's break it down. There's social housing, right, owned by councils and that sort of stuff, and kind of charities, and then you could have people who are sort of fuel poor, but not living in those sort of houses, but suffering. And then you could have your middle classes who are doing quite well, and you get your super rich. But if you look at people who've got their own houses, we'll come to them later. Is the biggest mover with what this government's trying to do in building its million homes, etc.? Do we need a fundamental shift in the way that local authorities build and social housing organisations start building that? Or do we need, so look, the new homes to come and homes that are being built, or do we need to concentrate on the fuel poor and retrofitting their homes? And then is there a separate thing for those who are wealthy enough? So they're the three sectors. So let's take them one by one. With the government's plan and the Warm Homes Plan and all of that, is the real thing that's going to shift decarbonising heat is actually local authorities building and builders in housing association building new homes that have got this in? Is that the thing that's going to move us?
Well, that's a really important dimension. In it, new build homes should be built to a high quality, and they should contain low carbon technologies from the beginning, because it's much easier to put them in from the start.
Yeah. So when you got the ground, put in the heat pump sources straight away on the ground before you build the house.
Yeah, absolutely. Or whatever the right heating system is for that particular new development. And there, again, lots of complexity in that. So it's different building a single unit house to multiple occupancy housing. So there'll be lots of different solutions for different types of homes. The Future Home Standard is a really big deal here. So that, when it comes into effect, will mean that homes should have to be built to a high fabric standard and have low carbon heating from the outset. Plus also hopefully solar panels as well. I think there may have been an announcement about half an hour ago about confirming that in comments from the Secretary of State, which I haven't had a chance to look into, but that's definitely something we've been advocating for, which is, and also that standard should be implemented as soon as possible, because the longer that homes are built to a lower standard, those are just more homes that have to be retrofitted for the future.
Exactly.
But that's a really important aspect of this, which is, and I'm going to be annoying in saying all of those types of homes are important, and roughly 80% of the homes that we'll have at 2050 have already been built. So there's huge amounts of existing homes that we have to tackle, and those need to be, to some extent, retrofitted and then transitioned to low carbon heating.
Fuel poor, and loads of us are fuel poor, to be honest, because of the price of energy so much. But let's just make it as people who are getting by, but won't be able to go and say, right, I'm going to change my boiler, and won't be able to say, let's stick solar panels. Maybe they live in somewhere they can't do that, or they just don't have the money. So let's tackle those people next. What can be done to help those people who are not really on the sort of, they're working people, I suppose, but they don't have the spare money to decarbonise? What would be the solution for them? What would you try and advocate?
Yeah, so we're all really keenly waiting for what's in the Warm Homes Plan, which is the government's vehicle for saying how, the government's got a target of retrofitting 5 million homes by 2030.
Steep target.
It is a big, ambitious target, and to do that, you're going to have to work across different segments. But if we focus in just on the fuel poor, two really important aspects, I think. One is that there needs to be, for people who can't afford any of the upgrades, there need to be grants that are available that help pay for those measures. So that's for insulation and for low carbon heating.
So the government's got to find the money.
Yeah, there's got to be well, it's a combination of government and energy suppliers. If you think of all the, there's £1 billion worth of eco funding that's available every year, and that's designed as a fuel poverty scheme. Although actually an alarmingly low amount of money from eco actually goes into fuel poverty every year, and there's much more that can be done to make sure that's focused. Almost, that much more of that money goes to putting measures in fuel poor homes. So there's a real opportunity there, which would mean the government has to put it much less of its hand in its pocket.
Yeah.
There's also a diversity of those homes. So some of those are private renter sector homes.
Yes.
Some of those are owner occupied. Some of those are social housing. So there's different policies that will have an effect on each of those. So the minimum energy efficiency standards are really important for private rented homes, where the renters have very little agency about the fabric changes and the heating system changes. There's been lots of progress in social housing, but lots more that can be done, and support from the government is really important there, both in terms of grants and loans. And then when we get to the owner-occupier sector, that's again, it's a really tricky sector. But really, so what we've seen work, and from our point of view, and I'm talking now as with my energy saving trust hat on, is where we've seen really effective delivery is in France. So France's rate of retrofit is about 10 times higher than in the UK.
Wow.
They have a really comprehensive grant delivery system, which is tiered. So if you're in a really low income, measures are basically fully funded. And then that tapers off depending on how much further up the income band you go. But it recognises that people who are on slightly higher incomes probably also going to struggle to afford measures. So it provides more of an incentive there to cover the gap. And then also at the highest level, there's a small incentive for people to take some action. And although that's delivering an incentive to higher earners, you might argue don't need the support. What it does do is it makes sure that supply chains are supported, because there's still retrofit happening. Those businesses keep delivering, and it means that they can gear up and have the skilled labour force that's there to serve more homes in the future. So all of those things are really important. And France seems to have got it right from that point of view.
Do you think that's a model that we could replicate here?
Well, that's one model that we could look at. The other model that we've got lots of experience of is in Scotland, where there's a combination of grant and loan. So for people who are in fuel poverty, the Warm Homes programme in Scotland fully pays for measures. But then there's a combination of grant and loan for people on higher income levels. So there's it's a bit like the boiler upgrade scheme grant, but slightly higher for heat pumps. And then there's a zero interest loan that can be taken out on top of that. And that loan is really attractive because it's zero interest. You don't pay any interest on it. And it helps to bridge that funding gap between, the whole installation of the heat pump will probably, in some cases, be more than the grant. So it just helps to bridge that funding gap. But it means that upfront, you're not having to find the money to measures.
A couple of other things, skills you talk about, and I know that the council is trying to promote the skills. We had it years ago with the kind of feed-in tariffs, cowboys getting involved and all of that. We haven't got enough engineers to install heat pumps at the rate that we're trying to get. I think we had 600,000 last year, and we've got to whack that up. We haven't got enough engineers to put in EV charging points, let alone anything else. So is there a skills element here for this heat decarbonisation that, again, we are missing? Because I can't remember the name of the scheme. You'll probably know it better than me. There was that scheme where you could go and get through the government. I think it was under the Tory government. You can go and get some green measures, but you couldn't find the people to actually install them.
Yeah. The green homes
grant. You probably remember it. Yeah. And that was a real thing. And I looked into that. I looked, this sounds quite good. No chance. No suppliers in my area. You can be on the list for years. So again, we seem to have so many little barriers here. But the skills one, which I know the council's interested in, where are we with that? And what do you think can be done to improve that?
So, I mean, this is a big area. And so I suppose it's important to say this is something that we really care about deeply. There is a skills gap, but there's a real opportunity here in terms of developing the jobs of the future for people who install clean heating systems, who are upgrading people's homes, who are developing heat networks, and so on and so forth. So, there's a massive economic opportunity here, as well as and filling a gap in the current workforce. Also, retraining opportunity for people who currently work in fossil fuel industries, but may also be going through a transition into cleaner industries. So we think that's really important. There's a massive role for government in coordinating that and working out, how to target people to come into that workforce, how to provide the skills training, and etc. I think the other part of this, that if this was a big bang exercise and you were going to do the transition overnight, you wouldn't have the workforce. But there is some phasing here that's really important. And so a massively important aspect that often gets overlooked is long-term thinking. So
there's not one government capable of that, Steve.
But what we've had in the past is a series of start-stop initiatives actually that's not been true in Scotland, and it's not been true in Wales. And what you've seen is the workforce respond in those areas. And there's more to do, because some of that, some of this is a UK issue, and workforces don't respect borders. If you're in Northumberland, you go and work in Scotland, and vice versa, right? So there's kind of a whole UK kind of vision of kind of how do you make this work, and lots of complexity with different levels of government who are in control of different things. But if you zoom out and you think, actually, what did businesses need? Businesses need certainty that this transition is going to go ahead, and they can plan against it. They can train people up, and they can put the money into developing people, retaining them. They'll have the business that's there to be able to sustain that, and they can grow in the future. Now, when we've had start-stop schemes in the past, actually that's proved really difficult for people to invest against. They've had to train people up and then let them go. It means the skills have dissolved. So this is an absolutely fundamental part. And what we want to see from the government is a commitment, and hopefully we see this in the Warm Homes Plan, to a long-term deployment of support from government, which will get the private sector responding.
The last thing I want to end with is something that we discussed before we started recording. Is there a backlash against net zero? Right? And you asked me, do you think there is one? And I'd say that I think there is. I don't think people disagree with the idea. Who wouldn't, right? Everyone wants cleaner air and cleaner water and cleaner place to live, and they want it, better. I think there's a real cost problem. I really do. And I think there's a cost problem pushing everyone whose budgets are already tight, whether that be personal or businesses. There's been, the question of, well, if we've got this oil and gas, why aren't we using it? And I can see people relating that. Why am I paying more to drive an EV when I can keep my car going? And why would I have to pay $7,500 for a heat pump when I've got a boiler that's working, right? And all of these things. Now, I don't think fundamentally the public have rejected net zero, but you can see the stuff that Tony Blair Foundation came out with, stuff, the view turn from Kemi Badenoch, that there is this feeling that the cost, and even the story we're around today, that Starn was looking at the cost of zonal pricing, whether that would be the right thing to do. All of these things are showing that, in a way, we've rushed to this target. Good thing. Yeah, let's all aim for it. And now the realities are sinking in. And do you think that's affecting consumers? So even when, and you know it as well as I do, there are free insulation grants out there and people don't take them, right? Yeah. They don't take them, they're out there. Yeah. Is there something going on, do you think, that's sort of affecting people believing in the net zero transition?
So there's a lot in this question. I'm not going to talk about zonal pricing. I think
that's fair enough. I don't even understand it, Stu, so don't worry.
But I think,
you get the point. I mean, what I'm saying.
And I think the statistics and the opinion polling show that people really support climate action, and that's consistently the case. But there is a cost of living crisis, and people are rightly worried about costs to them. And I suppose what we haven't had in UK-wide, you've had more of this in Scotland, more of this in Wales, is a government that's prepared to put the policies in place that help address those upfront costs, so that people can take an action and can make change, and that it will deliver benefits to them under the right set of circumstances. And some of those things still need to be addressed. So the cost of electricity, no, ignore zonal pricing, just the cost of electricity needs to come down compared to the price of gas.
Yeah.
And that's really important. That's a real focus of the work we do at the Heat and Buidlings Business Council. Is how do you address that? What are all the levers that you can pull to make that happen? So levy rebalancing, relying more on flexibility, et cetera, et cetera. So, there's a suite of things that we know should work, but there's kind of a bit of sequencing getting those to happen. I think the other thing you were talking about is there are offers on the table, but people don't take them up. And trust is an absolutely vital part of this, is that people need to know that those offers are right for them, are going to be the right technology. And they want some assurance that that's going to be, that they take quite a big step and that's going to be the right step for them. And again, what people don't have at the moment in many places is that kind of impartial help that says, yeah, actually, do you know what, cavity wall insulation is right for you? Or actually in your home, you haven't had cavity insulation, loft insulation yet. And those two things would be simple, straightforward. Here's how much it roughly costs, and here's what the benefit would be. So that kind of reveal of, okay, if you do this, this is the outcome, and this is what it would mean for you, is really important. Lots of the technologies that we represent in the council, most of them over their lifetime are actually, even with high electricity prices, often more effective than the gas boiler for the lifetime. But that's quite a big leap of faith for people who don't work in the industry, who need to have some assurance that actually that's going to be the case. So I think that, so what does that mean? What polling tells us is actually people support the transition, but we've got to make it work for people, and we've got to make it make sense for them individually. We've got to build a level of trust, both that what people are going to install is right for them, but also on the other side of it, if you do 1 million anything, it's not all going to go well. So when occasionally something doesn't go right, there's got to be trust that they can put things right, and that consumer protection level's got to be good as well. All of that's within the government, the UK government, to sort out at a UK level. And actually what we've seen is where devolved governments and combined authorities have been able to go further, faster. So for example, we're helping the North East Combined Authority deliver a one-stop shop in the Northeast. Actually, you can see that action is happening faster. So there's a whole range of different actors with different abilities to intervene and help people to understand what they've got to do, help people to connect with the right installers and the right technologies, and then help to make it happen financially as well.
It's a complicated one, for sure. Not going to be easy. I look at it, but I think, you've said some very interesting things. At the end of the day, to sum up, do you think it really is still, it's all about policy?
Well, so policies are really key. This is about shaping. Actually, I think it's about markets. Ultimately, and a lot of what we talked about is people going out into a market and choosing a technology and then having that delivered into their homes. But what policy can do is help to shape that market and make it really good. So I've worked for economic regulations, you kind of think of what are the good market hygiene factors, and trust, consumer protection, level playing field. Actually, so this is what policy can help to sort out. And again, as the Business Council, we're really focused on, okay, well, what's the right way in which policy can help to shape that? So for example, on something like the boiler upgrade scheme, the boiler upgrade scheme has been launched focused at heat pumps, and absolutely heat pumps are a key technology, but they're not the only technology that's going to help us through the transition. So one of the things we've been doing over the last year, 2 years, talking to decision makers and say, well, actually, hold on, if you're going to be supporting low carbon heating, actually you ought to be thinking of a suite of technologies that help you to get there.
Correct. Yes, agree.
And that to bring you back to where you started, that's one of the things the council is really effective at, is saying, we've got things that are investable, ready to go here. Here's how they work. Here's how they're suitable for different types of people, different types of homes. And actually, here's what we think the changes can be to policy that help to enable those to happen.
Stu, as ever, a pleasure. A man who can go on for years on this. I love it. And you've got so many hats. We'll bring you back on something else soon. Thank you so much for your time, mate. Really appreciate it.
Good to speak to you.
Good to talk to you. And audience, let us know what you think about the conundrum of how we decarbonise our homes. It's a big issue. Thanks for supporting the podcast. Please share and subscribe to our emails and tell your friends and family and colleagues about it. My thanks to Rob for the production this week. See you on the next episode of the Net Hero podcast.
You've just heard the Net Hero podcast from futurenetzero.com. Join us as we help you find ways to cut your carbon footprint as we head towards net zero. Subscribe and follow us on social media. futurenetzero.com. Better business, better planet.